Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm shooting this little revolver here. We'll fire a couple of shots and then we're going to talk about why I believe that revolvers are usually really bad choices for most women, most who are beginners especially, for self-defense. Okay, so let me fire a couple of shots. I'm shooting at about 30 feet here. All right, so a couple of days ago, I was called to a gun range to train a couple. They had just bought their first guns. The husband bought a Glock 19 MOS. He had a Wesson 507C on it. And the reason why he bought it, basically the gun store that he bought it from, a couple of weeks ago, I went in there and I, recommended to them that they start selling. They start really stocking up on a Wesson 507 C optics, preferably the 507 ACSS, which is really kind of hard to get. So I told them that they should try and sell them in combination, because I have seen that people shoot the pistols a lot better. So the husband got the 507 C optic with his Glock 19 MOS. The wife got the it was the Smith & Wesson model 642, all aluminum frame, hammerless, right? So it was kind of covered over here, like gun. In the gun store, all right, they had her squeeze the trigger to make sure that she could squeeze the trigger, and she was able to do that. Okay. Now, one of the things that I have found is that holding the revolver. First of all, a lot of women really have a hard time just squeezing the trigger. This one was strong enough that she was able to do it, but when I had her, when I met her at the gun range and I put the target, because I had brought these targets along, I put the target out there at about 30 feet, the way that target is right now, and I had her aim at the target, center mass, right, and I told her to aim and squeeze the trigger, and what happened was that now that she was aiming, the gun was starting to move all over the place as she was squeezing that trigger, because now she's trying to line up her sights and squeeze the trigger. In the gun stores, they just have them do this, which is very different than aiming and pressing the trigger. Okay, so what I did, this is the typical way that I train people. I brought along my guns. First I had them shoot this Palmetto PX9 with the optic. I had brought along my targets. And at 30 yards, which is about 80 feet, they were both getting about 95% hits with this rifle. Okay, so and I started them off with this, and first of all, they're loving it, right? They're having fun shooting. They can hit the targets. That's why I usually start people off with a rifle. Then I had them shoot the husband's Glock MOS. Now I had to sight it in first, all right? So I sighted it in. I gave him, I think, about a 20-yard zero. I sighted it in. Then I had the husband shoot. He's easily hitting targets at about 40 feet away. And then I had him hit targets out about 80 feet away, and he's even hitting those. Okay, so husband's doing great with the Glock MOS, easy stuff. I put the wife on it. She's at the 40 feet. She's hitting about 80%, so she's doing really good. Then I pushed her back to about 80 feet, and she's getting a few hits there too. So she's doing really good with the Glock MOS. I taught them how to reset, how to look for that trigger reset, so the finger's doing less work. They're both getting excellent hits. Okay, then I had them both try out the revolver. Right, that was the Smith & Wesson model 642. Aluminum frame, hammerless. I had the husband do it. Okay, so the husband, who prior, at about 40 feet was getting like 90% hits, now he's down to like about 40% hits, 35% hits, right? So then I put the wife on it at the same distance, where the wife before was getting, good hits, like above 75%. She can't get a single hit now. Okay, and then what I did is because I had them shooting the 5-inch targets. I pulled out because I had brought along that big target over there, that what is that? That's 1 foot wide by 2 feet long. And I brought it at half the distance. So now I got her shooting at about 15 feet. She can't get hits at that distance either. Put her back on the Glock. Real easy, she's getting hits at that distance. Put her back on the revolver, she can't get hits. And again, the reason is because now she has to aim and press the trigger. Now, the other difficulty that we ran into, it was a cloudy day. It was kind of drizzling, and we were, this range basically had a canopy, right? It was covered. So the revolver, which was aluminum, had a gray front sight, gray rear sight. And they both had a difficult time, actually, seeing the sights. Okay, I shot the gun myself. Obviously, because of my experience, I was able to hit the targets, right? I was able to find the sights, hit the targets, but because it wasn't that bright out, because we were under cover, I could see that, yeah, it is kind of difficult to see the sights because they were the same, they were both the same color. Now, realistically speaking, inside your house in the evening is typically not super lit up, right? So here's part of the reason why I switched to carrying a Glock 43 with an optic is because I definitely saw that I had a problem in low light conditions, right? Or even just dusk, or inside, indoors, where it's not super bright, where it's just, the normal, brightness that people typically have inside their homes in the evenings. I have a hard time finding the sights, even when they're, because a lot of times when you have the night sights, like this one over here, right? The front sight is glow in the dark, rear sight is blank. But here's the thing, inside of the home in the evening, it's really, it's not, because it has to be dark enough for that glow in the dark to really light up. So when it's just low light, that's not going to light up. So when it's like low light, the glow in the dark doesn't light up. Rear sight, I can barely see it. So the optic really makes all the difference, because in all lighting conditions, I can come out, find that optic, and hit my targets. Okay, so that was definitely an issue with the Smith & Wesson model 642, all gray gun, gray sights, gray front sight, gray rear sight. They had a really hard time finding the sights, but also, when they did find the sights, they had a real hard time pressing that trigger and keeping the sights on targets. Even though she was able to do this and squeeze the gun, when I told her to keep her sights on target and press the trigger, she was moving the gun around a little bit. So I've seen this many times before. That's why I tell people that revolvers are usually really bad choices for most women, usually for most guys too. There's a reason why semi-automatic pistols are so popular. There's a reason why the military, back in the early 1900s, moved away from revolvers as quickly as they possibly could, right? They went to semi-automatics. Out in the field, what happens is that the gears of the revolver are exposed, right? So if you get any dirt or sand if you drop this in the dirt and you get dirt in there, the gears are exposed, so the gun's going to jam up. Okay, so in a realistic outdoor environment, revolvers are pretty easy to jam up. With the semi-automatic, it's closed. So the only time the gun opens up is when you fire it. Okay. Now the other thing that's worth mentioning, when she was in the gun store, they had her try to rack the slide on the pistol, right, on the Glock, and she had a hard time racking the slide, and that's part of the reason why they kind of she kind of went with the revolver. But here's the thing. First of all, you're gonna load up the gun, right? Put it around the chamber, put it in the holster, because the holster is the safety mechanism for the pistol. You're gonna do that all in advance, okay? So at the point where you're actually ready to use a pistol for self-defense, the magazine's already in there, the round's already in the chamber. All you gotta do is take it out of the holster, and the gun is ready to fire. So all the hard work has already been done. So the loading and the chambering part, the preparation part might be a little bit more difficult with the semi-automatic, whereas the preparation part of just loading this gun is easier on the revolver. However, the shooting part is a lot harder on the revolver, whereas the shooting part is a lot easier on a semi-automatic pistol. And obviously, with a rifle, it's even easier. Okay, so that's one of the things. Now, the other thing with this Glock MOS that they bought in the store, the optic was not installed. So in the store, she was basically trying to grip the grips here, and she saw that her fingers, she couldn't have enough strength to rack the slide. However, once actually I didn't install the optic. I sighted it in, but the husband installed the optic. Once the optic was installed, I said, okay, great. Now hold the gun, grab the optic here, and rack the slide. She had no problem racking this slide once the optic was installed. Okay, so now she had something to grab onto, and it made it a lot easier for her to rack the slide. So that issue was gone. She had a little bit of an issue with taking the magazines out, with hitting the magazine release button, but she was still, she had to work it a little bit. Now with this Glock that I got here, when I built this gun, this came with the extended magazine release, which is obviously a lot easier. The problem is that if you have an extended magazine release, I find that a lot of times when it goes into the holster hits the magazine release and the magazine pops out. So what I do when I get the extended magazine releases, I file them down a little bit, and I get them so that they're just a tiny bit longer than the standard ones, but way shorter than the extended ones. And I find that I file it down to a point where it doesn't hit the holster, and it's easy for most women to hit the button and get the magazine out. So that's another option. However, even with the factory magazine release, she didn't have that much of a hard time. Plus, it's a Glock 19. It's got 15 rounds, in the gun. So it is not likely she would have to reload the gun. Okay, so again, versus the revolver, which only has 5 rounds, right? It was a five-shot revolver. Realistically, in a self-defense, stressful type of situation, if she can't, she's never going to get a chance to reload this. Okay, even though this might be a little easier, to open this up, drop these out. Let's say you have a speed loader. Realistically, she's never going to get to that point. So it's a lot better to have, a pistol that has 15 rounds in it, where you don't have to reload it. Okay, so now is there a place for the revolver, especially particularly with women now? Yes, there is. Okay, if for a woman that's going to buy a gun and has no intention of ever going to the gun range and ever practicing, the revolver is easier to load. If it's her intention to never practice with the gun, okay, the revolver is in that case is the better choice, because at grappling distance, where you're not gonna, you don't have to aim, where she could pull the trigger, it's going to work. So in that instance, it's the better choice. However, most rooms inside of the house are at least 15 feet long, and usually we advise people to designate a safe room, basically to come up with a plan. Right, so that in most cases that's the bedroom, and we tell them to go behind the bed so that there's some type of cover or some type of obstruction. There's a barrier between them and the person that's coming into the room. So from the door to the behind the bed position, there's about like 15 feet. Okay, so at grappling distance, you may be able to take this revolver, press it, and you're going to hit the target that's 2 feet in front of you. However, at 15 feet, which is where that big target is that I was shooting before, I got to aim at that target. I can't just point shoot a target at 15 feet. I have to aim at a target at 15 feet. So at 15 feet, point shooting is not going to work, and especially if you only got 5 rounds in the gun. Basically all you got after that is is a really light hammer, right? Maybe you can hit somebody with. Okay, so as far as self-defense, you have to plan for aiming. Okay, so yeah, and especially with the optics, it gives a new shooter a tremendous advantage. And the situation that I'm explaining to you guys with this couple that I had, I've seen many times before. Now this was a case where they had already bought their guns, right, and they bought the Glock MOS. But a lot of times when I'm training beginners, You know, I bring out my guns and I'll put, you know, I mean, it's very typical for people to hit the targets very first shot that they fire with a gun that has an optic on it. You know, with the rifles, I will easily get them hitting 95% hits at 30 yards, you know, about 80 feet. With the handgun, at half that distance, at about 20 yards, I will have them, you know, I'll have them getting 75% hits with a pistol that has an optic on it. Okay, so those are my thoughts I want to share with you guys. A lot of times gun stores push the revolvers on women because they're easier. You know, they are easier to load, they're easier to understand. But as far as actually shooting it and hitting the targets, revolvers are really difficult guns, especially if you don't have a strong finger pull where you can basically pull the trigger and keep your sights on target as you do that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you got any comments, put in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you guys. If you're not a member from the channel, please subscribe. I'll talk to you guys soon.